Thanks for joining us on Selma Sonic Black Belt News Network. Sitting next to me is William Henry, who is the new director down at Old Cahawba Archeological Park. And William, first of all, thank you for spending some time with me, and welcome to Dallas County. So let's learn a little bit about you. Where are you originally from, and how did you get here?
I was born in Los Angeles, California, but my family moved away when I was really young, and we settled in northern Kentucky, which is where I went through high school, and eventually I went to do my bachelor's degree in Cincinnati, which is right across the river from where my parents are at.
How did you get from Kentucky? What in Kentucky directed you towards history and archaeology? And
I had an interest in history and archaeology from a very young age. My grandfather, I grew up watching documentaries on the History Channel, National Geographic, things like that. And even as a small kid, I would sit in front of the TV, sitting on his ottoman for hours, just quietly watching these documentaries with no fuss.
Oh, yeah.
And as I got older and older, it was always, I want to be an archaeologist. I want to be a historian. I want to be paleontologist. But I sort of am living the every child's dream of, I want to be an archaeologist. So I did it.
That's awesome. I know. I wish I'd have followed that dream too.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you followed your dream, and where else has it taken you?
So my first stop was at Cincinnati at Xavier University. There I studied classics and classical humanities through what was called the HAB program, which I believe they've sunsetted. It doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, okay.
But it was a very long-standing honors program teaching Latin, Greek, and philosophy.
Wow.
After that, I went and taught Latin at a high school in Philadelphia for a year.
Really?
And then following that year of teaching, and it was sort of a service corps program. So a lot of that was, I wasn't making any money. I was just doing it to get the experience.
Right.
I went to the American University of Rome. So I moved to Italy to pursue my master's.
Wow.
Following my master's, and that master's at the American University was in sustainable cultural heritage. So at that point is when I started pivoting towards, all right, I've got the first framework down, and now I want to pivot towards archaeology.
Right.
Once I did that, I went and applied and got accepted to my PhD at the University of Rome La Sapienza.
Wow.
And that was a tough process, but I made it through that, and sort of the rest is history. In the meantime, too, I was working this whole I was working this entire period. So in the time of all of that schooling, I managed to work in Romania, Hungary, Greece, and Italy.
Ooh, wow.
And then whenever I was in the States, I was doing cultural resource management, and essentially I was able to amass about 10 years of experience before coming to Cahawba in cultural resource management, and probably half that, but sort of seasonal, working overseas for archaeological field schools.
So were you actually doing archaeology overseas?
Yeah.
You know how jealous I am? That's awesome.
Yeah.
What are some of the places you were?
So the projects that I was most associated with in terms of like real archaeological projects were all in Romania. I worked for a field school that was excavating a Roman villa there for several seasons. Before that, I did a Roman military fort. We did some experimental archaeology workshops.
Oh, cool.
A couple of other projects in between there. We did GPR at a medieval castle.
Oh, man.
I worked in Italy doing some excavations there through my university. But most of that work there was sort of archaeology adjacent, so cultural resource management side and heritage management side.
Man, that's awesome.
I did some work in Greece, mostly for museums, and then did some work in Hungary as well.
Man.
But that was all pretty light.
You know, that's you're talking about places where you can't walk without stepping on something historical.
Oh, I mean, you can't spit on the ground without
Right.
hitting something that's 2,000 years old or older.
Yeah.
So, but it's really no different than here.
No,
I mean,
it's
there are
not.
some parts of Alabama you can't put a shovel in the ground without pulling up hundreds or thousands of pieces of debitage and flake, or projectile points, or historic pottery or bricks.
Oh
And
yeah.
Cahawba is no different. Literally, anytime you put a shovel out here, you're going to find
Well, you stop and think,
bricks
even
and
though this
things.
place wasn't occupied very long, I mean, relatively, there were a lot of people here, and it was a fairly compact area. So there's got to just imagine how much archaeology here at this site hadn't even been touched yet.
Yeah.
You know.
Archaeologists tend to talk about sites in terms of how long were they occupied and how
Hmm.
intensely were they occupied.
Intensely, right.
So this is a site here that was not occupied in the grand scheme of things for very long,
Right.
but was occupied intensely for a very short period
That's a
of
good
time.
word. Yeah.
Whereas, for example, the Roman villa I worked on in Romania,
Hmm.
that was occupied for a fairly long period of time, a couple hundred years,
Right.
um, but not very intensely. So we still found a lot of stuff, a lot of really good information, but it's all from a single
Right.
family,
And over
or
a long period of
over a
time.
long period of
Yeah.
time. Their descendants, and then they got kicked out and a new family moved in or whatever. Maybe it's a couple families in
Yeah.
sequence, but never more than one family.
How did you find, and what brought you to Alabama to Old Cahawba?
So those are two separate questions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
Really,
actually
they are.
was working for Tennessee Valley Archaeological Research
Oh
up in
yeah.
Huntsville. But the year before I came to Cahawba, and the year before I went to TVAR, I was working for All Phases Archaeology out of Mobile,
Oh, okay.
doing CRM all across the Southeast.
Wow. Cool.
A lot of work in Mississippi,
Hmm.
Alabama, a little bit of work in Tennessee. But and before that, I was doing CRM up near home. But I initially moved to Alabama because my fiance, soon to be wife, is from
Hmm.
Alabama. Her family's from Alabama, and they're all located in Huntsville.
Okay.
So I essentially, once the work overseas was starting to cool, and I was getting worn out and didn't really want to be traveling overseas as
Yeah.
much, um, I said, "All right, I'm moving to Huntsville." Found work with All Phases first, and then eventually with
Cool.
TVAR, and spent 2 years working here before I met Linda Derry, who's the
Hmm.
previous site director. We
Right.
met at an Alabama Archaeological Society meeting. Um,
Cool.
and after the meeting, she approached me and told me that I should apply for her job since she was retiring,
Oh,
that she
cool.
thought I would be a good fit for it. And I hadn't heard of Cahawba. I hadn't thought about Cahawba
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
anything before that point. So she told me to apply, and I said, okay.
And of course, your first thing was the Lafayette. So it was kind of a baptism by fire. You,
Yeah.
you came in with one of the biggest events that they had at Cahaba. How did that feel? How was that?
So a lot of Lafayette was Linda's swan song. So
Yeah.
it was her brainchild. All I did was help with the logistics and make sure that everything was set up and ready to go according to her vision and what she wanted for that event. So in the grand scheme of things, yeah, it was a lot of work for me and all of the staff here at Cahaba, but really the success of that event, I think, is all
Oh,
Linda's fault.
fantastic. It was fantastic.
But it wasn't just the Lafayette event that I walked into coming here. We've had a number of changes and things that needed to happen due to storms and weather
Right.
or
Yeah.
unforeseen events. We had some nasty storms, so we had to put up take down the trees and put up this fence that's right over here.
Yeah.
We built the new bike shed to
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
get the bikes out so that people are now using them more, and
Hmm.
we know that they're using them more than when they were put back behind.
Right.
Um, we've had new power poles installed throughout the park, and those holes that they were putting in needed to be surveyed for archaeological remains. So all of that was in the first month of me walking through that door.
Have you, at this point, come up with any ideas of other things that you'd like to see changed, or?
There are a lot of ideas and proposals up in the air for
Hmm.
new events, new things that we want to focus on, new anything. But a lot of it too is, you know, Cahaba's got a certain charm about it as it is, and there's a way to overdo it. So
Very true.
I've been trying to strike that balance of of that. For example, with haunted history, the way that happens every October.
Yeah.
Linda's been doing that forever, and I want to continue doing it.
Great.
But there are some things that I maybe want to tweak a little bit to make it more kid friendly.
Hmm.
Bring the kids out to it, or make it so that more people can enjoy it.
Yeah.
Or we do different stories at different locations. So a lot of the same things, but expanding on them or
Yeah.
just
Yeah, that's
tweaking
good.
them to modify it.
That's
We
good.
have other programs that are coming in. We have a gross out camp coming in July
Yeah.
for kids,
That's cool.
and it's like a science camp.
That's awesome.
Cahawba River Society is coming in and they're doing some programming.
Oh, that's good.
Um, and hopefully we have other events that are my brainchild
Hmm.
coming forward in the future here too.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Still waiting on to hear if we're approved for the proposals I submitted. Having this run by the state affords Cahawba a lot of the protections and a lot of the
Hmm.
necessary resources for its continued survival. From the perspective of a park, just for people to be able to come here and enjoy it, and
Exactly. Right.
getting the grass cut, that sort of thing, but also from an archaeological perspective, where if the state didn't own this and this was private property and someone still had a park and was
Oh, yeah.
maintaining the property, they wouldn't necessarily be able to maintain these archaeological remains, and those would eventually just decay and
That's right.
be
And,
gone.
and the beauty of it is, since the state does own it and it's protected, you can focus on other sites that aren't protected because you know this is here and you can come to it
Mhm.
at any time.
And that's what the private sector CRM world, one of their sort of things that they work on is whenever there is development that's going to impact archaeology, they go in and they document it. So
Right.
and that's a lot of my experience, so I can
Yeah.
sort of speak intelligently about that too. But it's there's archaeology in the United States is a several tined fork,
Yeah.
um,
I like the way you
and
put that.
it's the federal, it's the state, it's universities,
Hmm.
it's uh, private sector firms,
Right.
it's nonprofit organizations, museum, libraries, archives. There are so many different factors that go into any archaeological project or any heritage project that you really have to make sure. And that's not to mention, that's just on the right, the organizational level side of things. You also
Right.
have other nations and countries that are on the same, and tribal, nations and
Oh
things
God. Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
on that same track. So there are so many stakeholders on any given project that it's a balancing act, and in order just to do any work, there's a
Hmm.
process, and that process is sort of unattainable for a single individual or single property owner to go
Hmm.
through without support.
With your experience, do you see yourself doing any of that while you're directing here? Still stepping outside and helping some of the because there's a lot of archaeological sites just in this area.
So I will say that if someone came through the door and asked for my help to come out and say, tell them about their property,
Hmm.
I would be very happy to go over to their property and take a look around and just give them my opinion on the matter. Or if it's something that I'm not comfortable with my expertise, telling them what to do or what to look for, I can point them in the right direction.
That's good.
Um,
That's a good thing. That's a good that makes you a good resource because you have other resources.
Yeah, and not just me within the state, but the Alabama Historical Commission.
Right.
All of their emails are on their website,
Hmm.
and they have professionals that you can reach out to and ask questions to, depending on what it is you've got. If you have a cemetery on your project, maybe you reach out to the person over
Right.
cemeteries. If you've got a question about some other topic, you've got those people who are available,
Right. Right.
and just having an understanding that if you have something on your property and you have a question, asking a question doesn't cost you anything.
True.
Having it explored, that's where
Right.
archaeology gets expensive.
It
And
can
that's
very.
what's the unattainable part for most
Yeah.
property owners.
And that. Yeah. And that's one of the problems with our. We need to support and we need to preserve and we need to study, but we need the funds to do it, and that's where it starts to be a little bit of a
Yeah.
hiccup.
And in my education and my experience, I've always tried to live by the philosophy of archaeology is not a drain, it's a faucet.
Yeah.
So it might cost money, but the generative value after that it might be able to pay for itself in certain circumstances, depending on how you organize that project. Maybe there are grants, maybe there are ways to get it
Mhm.
paid for in other ways and around that. So I don't want to give up too much information about what
Well,
I've got
no.
planned
Yeah.
for Cahawba, but
Oh, excellent. I'm glad to know that.
yeah,
And,
I'm
see, and
hoping
that's the
that we are
thing,
able to do stuff here.
because that, and like you say, to me, it's not a cost, it's an investment.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we learn now is something that can be taught, an education that can be passed on to the future.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, if people will understand that history is something you learn from and move on from, that they will take that and go, oh, let's learn as much as we can. Because the cliche, and the older I get, the more I realize cliches are true. If you don't learn your history, you're going to repeat it, and you don't want to repeat the mistakes.
Right.
And archaeology and history historians can tell us where those mistakes are and where the good things are.
Yeah. And one of the big factors, I don't know if this is necessarily a problem in Alabama, but in general, one of the biggest issues in archaeology right now is that professionals are sort of excluded from the conversation a lot of times. So
Professional archaeologists?
hmm
Oh,
well, professional historians, just professionals.
right.
So a lot of, for example, we have a sign in Cahawba saying no metal detecting. We
Mm-hmm.
get asked pretty often, why can't I metal detect? Why can't I do that? And the reason is because the archaeologists are the ones doing it. And
Right.
whenever we find something, where we found it, at what depth in the ground we found it, just even the grass around it might be important for
Certainly.
us to understand exactly what that thing
The
is.
context, and a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah. One of the things that I hope to be able to do in the future is to, have programming where the general public can come and learn how to do that properly,
Mm-hmm.
so that even if they did find something on their property, they can go through that process and have an understanding of what kind of information we need to be able to tell them something about it. Because there are not enough archaeologists in the world to be able to manage all of the
Oh, God, yeah.
archaeology just in Alabama.
Oh, certainly.
Even if you got us all together and said we're going to do the whole state of Alabama, it still wouldn't be enough.
No.
So it's trying to have that public outreach and have people understand, if you find something, maybe don't touch it unless you know what you're doing. And if you do know what you're doing, make sure everything is well documented, and then bring it into me, and I tell you something more
Sure.
than what you knew about it.
And of course, you've also got Jonathan here, who's a tremendous resource.
Oh yeah, and
So if you're not available, I'm sure he would be glad to help.
absolutely, and he knows a lot more about Alabama archaeology than I do.
He's tremendous.
When it comes to archaeology, there's sort of two camps. You're either on the history side of it or the science side of it.
Oh, okay.
The history side of it is what are you looking at?
Mm-hmm.
And the science side tends to be like, how are you looking at it?
Mm-hmm.
And how did you get to that point?
Right.
What are the methods that you used? I'm on the science side, and Jonathan is more on the history side. Obviously, we both overlap. We both have both of we have aspects from both camps.
But y'all could complement each other tremendously.
Absolutely, Jonathan. I couldn't ask for a better partner and assistant director going forward. He's been a really invaluable resource.
Fantastic. So you got some plans that kind of still in the works right now, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to tell us any of them yet? Any top secrets that you want to let us know?
I shouldn't. The only thing I think I'm comfortable saying is that we're going to start. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to start doing archaeology at Cahawba.
Oh,
Open,
now you got me excited.
Yeah, and it'll be open and viewable to the public.
Excellent.
If we're able to get it going. But as far as the details for who's eligible and what's going on and what's the format, that's all still being reviewed. So,
wonderful.
So we're fingers crossed, but no promises, because we're not there yet.
Yeah. Well, keep me informed on how that goes. Now, we're going to continue this interview later on. So let's call this, thank you for joining me here at the park. And y'all join us, because we're going to go visit his house.